Welcome to Still City News. We hear a lot of talk about, is Kenny Pickett the one? Is he that franchise quarterback? Should the Steelers just move on? We hear all that stuff because he's being compared to Ben Roethlisberger's first season, which really isn't the right comparison, in my opinion. Ben Roethlisberger came on to the Pittsburgh Steelers with veteran players and some future Hall of Famers. Definitely a different situation. Ben Roethlisberger, a great quarterback, had the skills, had the abilities that he needed, and had the speed that he needed. But is there a better comparison? Let's look at another great Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback from the 1970s, when in the league less games were played, but it appears that Kenny Pickett and both Terry Bradshaw played the same amount of games in season one. So I want to take a look side by side at the statistics. I know the game has changed tremendously since then. The game was far more brutal back then. It was a completely different game, but you get an idea of the comparison in those stats. And the way I look at it, and I look at this, I say, wow, Kenny Pickett is looking really good right now. Now, we, of course, recently had Ben Roethlisberger for many years. So we're accustomed to a certain kind of Pittsburgh Steelers team recently, and it always hasn't been like that. And there were decades where the team struggled tremendously, and I'm sure many of you remember those days. But if you look at the stats side by side, there are a lot more similarities. And in many cases, you see Kenny Pickett actually outperforming Terry Bradshaw in his first season. And we have yet to see how the second season is going to pan out, as it progresses. And we'll look at that at the end of this season and do another comparison to see. But this is what I wanted to show you right now. So here, take a look at this. Now, looking at these statistics, let's look at this is 1970, Terry Bradshaw's first season where he played a lot of games. He played 13 games. He started 8 of them, and he had a record of 3-5. The team was 3-5. The team was 7-5 with Kenny Pickett in 2022, and he played 13 games and started 12 games. Now, completions, Terry Bradshaw had 83 and Kenny Pickett had 245. Attempts were 218 for Terry Bradshaw and 389 for Kenny Pickett. Now, of course, the percentage of completion was 38.1 for Terry Bradshaw and 63.0 for Kenny Pickett. Yards passing, 1,410 for Terry Bradshaw, 2,404 for Kenny Pickett. And look at this, the longest pass. Now, Terry Bradshaw did have the longest pass of 87 yards, and Kenny Pickett had 57. Now, touchdowns, 6 for Terry Bradshaw, 7 for Kenny Pickett. Interceptions, big difference. Terry Bradshaw threw 24 interceptions that season in 1970, and Kenny Pickett threw 9. Passer rating was 30.4 for Terry Bradshaw and 76.7 for Kenny Pickett. Now look at this, rushing attempts, 32 Terry Bradshaw, attempts 55 Kenny Pickett. Now completed rushing yards were 233 for Terry Bradshaw, 237 yards rushing for Kenny Pickett. And if you look at this, we've got yards averaged for rushing, 7.3 for Terry Bradshaw. We got 4.3 for Kenny Pickett. Longest rushing yards was 22 for Terry Bradshaw and 23 for Kenny Pickett. 1 touchdown for Terry Bradshaw in 1970 and 3 rushing touchdowns for Kenny Pickett in 2022. Sacks, Kenny Pickett was sacked 27 times. Terry Bradshaw was sacked 25 times. And fumbled 3 times for Terry Bradshaw and 4 for Kenny Pickett. As you can see from those statistics, this is not the time to be talking about drafting another quarterback or just forget Kenny Pickett. We have other options. We need to find another option going forward. It is so early. Look how many years it took Terry Bradshaw to get up to the quarterback rating that Kenny Pickett is at right now. To get above 80, I mean, it took 5 seasons. By that 6th season, Terry Bradshaw was right up there. So look what he did for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers selected Kenny Pickett for a reason. They saw something in Kenny Pickett, and it appears that they have a lot of faith in Kenny Pickett. I believe we're going to be seeing a lot more of Kenny Pickett, and I believe that as an organization, they would obviously see that there is a lot of building and growing to do. Remember, if you want up-to-date Pittsburgh Steelers news, talk, and analysis, you can subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Thanks for watching.